Welcome to the Holy Post. Many of our political leaders like to invoke the Bible, but Rabbi Held says many don't understand one of its most important commands. He argues that Scripture's call to love immigrants was a moral revolution, and that the mistreatment of immigrants is an abomination in God's eyes. Today we discuss his editorial in the New York Times. Then I interview Father James Martin about his new memoir, Work in Progress, about his journey from the business world to the priesthood. We also discuss the link between Jesuit spirituality and Protestant theology, and we get nerdy about Jesus and temple theology. Also this week, the rise of non-denoms, and Phil wants cornhole in the Olympics. Hey, there's a ton of fun stuff happening over at HOLYPOST Plus right now. In fact, the conversation over there has exploded in the last week because of my bonus interview with Joshua Harris and the recent Skye Pod episode I recorded with Caitlin about Harry Potter. And also this week, I have a bonus interview with Father James Martin about his advocacy for LGBTQ Catholics. So if you're not part of HOLYPOST Plus yet, you need to get over there now and join the conversation. You'll get access to all the stuff we make at HOLYPOST Media, you'll get to interact with other Holy Posters, and you'll be supporting our work of creating smart, orthodox, pro-neighbor content. You can sign up at holypost.com/plus. And right now we're offering a free 1-week trial. So head over to holypost.com and sign up today. Here's episode 709.
Hey there, welcome back to the Holy Post podcast. I'm Phil Vischer. I'm here with Kaylin Shess. Say hi, Kaylin.
Hi, Phil.
And Skye Jatani.
Hi.
Hi. And they're both trying to research an acronym that Caitlin threw out moments ago, thinking it meant something, and we may be learning that it means nothing.
In pop culture, specifically the TV show Thunderbirds, FAB was used as a catchphrase for message received or to just mean fabulous.
What? That's not an acronym?
I know.
Fabulous.
FAB?
FAB. I did think it was an acronym, but I like it more now that it's
Is it that much harder to say fabulous than to say FAB?
FAB.
But it's got to stand for something.
Thunderbirds. Did you watch a...
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I didn't think you watched any television. I thought you just
occasionally
read Little House on the Prairie.
I did actually.
And needlepointed.
I watched a lot of Little House on the Prairie.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the good one. The good
Oh, yeah. On DVD?
Mm-hmm,
Oh, Little House on the Prairie on DVD.
Little House on the Prairie.
That's very educational.
Mm-hmm.
Misconceptions. Although not an acronym, it has often been incorrectly interpreted by fans as standing for fully advised and briefed, fully acknowledged broadcast, fully airborne. Those are all false.
I mean fully acknowledged broadcast. Like, because you were asking, should we start recording? And I'll start saying FAB, fully acknowledged broadcast.
And now the theme song.
What's the news that you like the most? Who's your favorite podcast host? If it's breakfast, get your toast. It's Skye, Phil, Caitlin, and the Holy Post. Skye, Phil, Caitlin, and the Holy Post.
And sometimes other people.
This episode is sponsored by Blueland. When our kids were little, keeping the house clean became really important. Why? Because they licked stuff. They put everything in their mouths. The candy is on the floor. Wait, now it's back in their mouth. Lisa didn't just want our house clean, she wanted it mom clean. Clean enough for kids whose little fingers were everywhere and then back in their mouths. That's why we recommend switching to Blueland. Their products are made to meet the highest environmental standards. They aren't just clean, they're mom clean. Blueland products are 100% plastic-free and made with certified clean ingredients that are safe to use around the little ones we care about so much. You don't have to choose between the safe option and what actually gets your house clean. Try their dishwasher tablets, laundry tablets, or toilet tablets. Proven effective and completely plastic-free. And Blueland has a special offer for Holy Post listeners. Right now, get 15% off your first order by going to blueland.com/holypost. You won't want to miss this. Blueland.com/holypost for 15% off. That's blueland.com/holypost to get 15% off.
One of the repeated themes of this show is it's complicated. Rather than two-dimensional binary thinking and social media sound bites, we try to take the issues of the day and make them three-dimensional and nuanced. A lot of things are just more complicated than we've been led to believe. But you know what's not complicated? AG1. And that's why it's a health routine that you, like me, are more likely to maintain. Just 20 seconds, 1 scoop, 8 ounces of water, done. Drink it first thing before your tea or coffee, before you've even checked your phone. It will become a micro habit that anchors everything else. And now's a great time to try it because AG1 has unrolled their next-gen formula with more vitamins and minerals than ever, clinically proven to fill common nutrient gaps. And AG1 now comes in multiple flavors: original, citrus, berry, and tropical. They're all delicious, but I like tropical the best. AG1 has over 50,000 verified 5-star reviews and comes with a 90-day money-back guarantee. Go to drinkag1.com/holypost to get their very best offer. You'll get a free AG1 flavor sampler and AGZ sampler to try all the flavors, plus free vitamin D3 plus K2 and AG1 welcome kit with your first AG1 subscription offer. That's drinkag1.com/holypost. drinkag1.com/holypost. And thanks to AG1 for sponsoring this episode.
That was the silliest thing ever.
That's saying
At least
something from you.
top 10 silly thing. Hey, let's talk about the news this week. What happened this week? Did you watch the Olympics?
Yes.
I watched virtually none.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, boring.
Okay. Caitlin, you watched. You enjoyed?
I am obsessed with Alyssa Liu. Is that her name? Am I saying her name right?
Yeah, I think so.
The American
Yes.
figure skater who won. Her routine was so fun. She was so fun to watch.
She was freaking happy.
She was so happy. And then her being so excited with, I think, the bronze medal winner.
Oh,
right
yeah.
afterwards,
She
they were
picked her up.
hugging
She
and they were
picked
jumping
her
up and
up.
down. She was so cute.
Yeah, she was. She reminded me, I finally looked over to my wife and said, this is what would happen if Jennifer Lawrence won figure skating gold. She's like Jennifer Lawrence.
That's such a strange comparison.
She reminded me.
Like she looks
Like
like
she
her?
looks like her?
Looks a little like her, but acts like her. Just
okay,
the completely like detached kind of goofiness.
Yeah,
you
okay.
know?
I see what you mean. And her whole story of how she retired because she was
16.
sick at 16.
I tried to retire at 16 and the Social Security department wouldn't.
They were like,
we're not hearing it. No, not for you, pal.
No. But the fact that she
Get back to the coal mines, they said.
The fact that she came back and she was like, I'm going to do this my way. I'm not going to let anyone starve me.
Yeah.
I'm not going to
That was like the best story of the Olympics.
That was so
because so many of the
fun.
other potential best stories were disappointments.
like the guy who admitted to cheating on his girlfriend.
Oh, yeah, there was that.
That was rough.
And then it felt bad for the quad god. He didn't do so well. And the speed skater didn't do as well as people thought he would do. And there were a lot that didn't do as well as they thought they would do.
Won the hockey, right?
Yeah, we won hockey, but it was all NHL players playing against each other. It was a contest
Just
of
like reorganized by country.
Which country has the best NHL players?
Yeah,
and that is not as inspiring to me. Skye, but you didn't care and you didn't watch. Why? Are you not a patriot? Do you not like sports? Do you not like winter? Pick one or more of the above.
I don't have a really good excuse. We were busy.
For 10 straight days, you were just too busy to...
My youngest daughter is a high school senior. This was the end of she plays varsity basketball. It was the end of the season. There was a lot going on.
Okay.
It's been a busy
That's a
season.
thing.
Okay, you know who we should be asking though about this?
Esau.
Oh, sure.
He wrote a piece about it that ended up in New York Times, and then they just included him on a little round table. He was on a New York Times round table to talk about the Olympics.
People should read that. That was good. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's not what I meant. I meant our producer, Mike.
Oh, yeah.
Who went curling with his wife recently.
No, he did not.
He did for date night. Me and Noah were watching their boys so they could go curling.
Her salon.
No, we went curling and it was really fun.
Where do you go curling?
The Itasca Country Club in the wintertime has curling lanes that you can rent similar to a bowling lane.
Oh,
that's crazy.
My goodness.
I just wanted everyone to hear that because that's crazy.
Did you notice what I did on Twitter that went viral?
We're not on Twitter.
What?
So.
Yeah,
no, I didn't.
I tweeted because I was just watching curling. Because like every day there was more curling.
There was a lot of curling.
They curl the entire week away. There's more hours of curling than any other sport, and maybe all the other sports put together. I can't tell. And so I just tweeted, if the Winter Olympics get curling, it's only fair that the Summer Olympics get cornhole. Because it's similar.
Yeah.
And it could be going on throughout the entire...
Exactly. If it's the kind of thing you can do on a date night,
then... every day, it's like, well, let's see how the cornhole is going. And
honestly, I'm into that.
And... that got liked more than I think any tweet I've ever tweeted except one. And when it hit 30,000 likes or 33,000 likes, NBC jumped in
What?
and said, we'll get right on
Are
it.
you making this all up?
You could be responsible.
Yes.
For
I am bringing
cornhole
to the summer games.
Wow.
I wouldn't be surprised if it ended up getting there. It's got to be, I don't know what kind of international following it has, but it's such a portable sport.
People totally
sport.
know how it works. They've
Such
done
a
it before.
Is that its proper name?
No, I'm sure there's
Cornhole?
another name.
Isn't it just
I
like
think that's the American
bags?
backyard name. But I think I was going to suggest this to NBC, but then I think they had already stopped listening to me and moved on. That we could combine cornhole and gymnastics, and it's a giant board, and gymnasts have to vault and then land in the hole.
Or knock other gymnasts off the board.
And if you land on the board next to the hole, you
Phil.
get a 5-point deduction and immediate medical attention.
You would need it.
Because
Yeah.
that would hurt. Or it could be a synchronized diving thing where you dive through the hole in the board into the pool. There's so much we could do
But
with
again,
this.
in the normal form of the game, you're trying to knock the opponent's bags off of the...
Well,
Do
but you're trying to get your bag through the hole.
Yeah, but
That's the first goal. The first goal of cornhole, get the bag
Do
in the
you-
hole.
first rule of cornholes. We don't talk about cornhole, Phil.
do we have bowling in the Olympics?
No.
Because that feels
No.
kind of more like the summer parallel.
Yeah, I don't know why they
Bowling.
pick what they pick for new things.
There's a criteria.
I was going to say they have to like propose it and then it goes.
and
through
it has
a
to be
whole
played by a
thing.
certain number
I
of
just think they
countries.
should stop. Because like mountaineering, did you see what mountaineering is?
No.
In the Winter Games?
Yeah.
That's a thing?
Yeah, you ski uphill, it's like cross-country skiing, but you ski uphill for a while, then you take off your skis and you run up a flight of stairs. And then you do that maybe one more time, and then you put on your skis and you ski back down to the beginning.
Oh.
It's skiing uphill and running upstairs, uphill.
Why stairs?
I don't know. It's weird.
Because they can't guarantee
just
the
doesn't make any
continuity of other terrain.
I don't know. It doesn't make any
That's
sense.
really
It's like, why
wild.
does breakdancing in the summer games? It doesn't.
Well, they got rid of it, didn't they?
I think maybe because it
Yeah,
was such a disaster.
was rough.
And they're going to replace it with ballroom dancing.
Is that true?
No.
No.
I would watch that though.
I remember as a kid watching
watch that.
I was watching ballroom dancing with
gonna
my
get-
parents for some reason, and they were talking about Viennese waltzes,
Yeah.
and I thought they said Vietnamese waltzes,
Oh.
and I was so confused for the longest time why the Vietnamese waltz.
You don't think the
you don't think
Vietnamese
they
should
do?
be allowed to waltz?
It didn't seem indigenous to
Wow.
the culture.
That's really. That's.
Okay,
I
we learned
think,
something about Skye.
I'm pretty sure that's offensive. And if we talk about this for a second longer, we're going to get the cat. So I'm moving on. Other big news last week was there are no more tariffs, and yet there are. Tariffs are dead. Long live the tariffs.
Yes.
It's confusing.
We probably don't need to talk about that. Should we care?
I mean, I think we should care, but I don't know that any of us are quite qualified to comment on them.
Caitlin.
I've listened to a lot of people talk about them, and what I
Caitlin.
learned was no one knows what's happening or what will happen.
Caitlin. You seem to think we can only talk about things that we're qualified to talk about.
I think we should know some things.
Do you
We know
know
some things.
how little I am qualified to talk
But
about?
you're fun. You know?
I don't understand why this is that complicated.
What?
Wow,
The
that's
tariff-
a start.
the tariff
That's
Oh, the
conversation.
tariff thing. Yeah.
Article 1 of the Constitution says that the Congress has the sole
Oh,
power
this
to
part.
levy
Yeah.
taxes and tariffs.
Yes.
I just mean
why is this so
the
hard?
macroeconomic effects of all of
Oh, I'm
this,
not talking
or
about the
how it will
effects.
work out with the countries that
No,
have
no, no.
already paid
Yeah,
tariffs.
I just want to
and-
know, do I get my money back?
I don't think you're getting
All
any
the money back
No.
I paid in because I think I paid millions of dollars in tariffs.
tariffs?
I'm pretty sure I
know
paid
what?
millions of dollars in tariffs.
Wait, what tariffs got struck down?
All of them.
All
Because
No,
we were
not
just,
all of them,
no,
but
I was
most
gonna
of
say
them.
not all of them
Most of
because
them.
we just paid. I just bought my wedding dress, and we paid a tariff on it because it's coming from Australia.
Yeah.
well,
So I would like some money
there's
back.
now a 15% tariff on everything around the world. It was 10%, but then Trump went to sleep and woke up the next day, and now it's 15%.
Okay,
But it's only in place for 150 days.
Yeah. So you got 150 days.
well, it's shipping right now, so
If you
maybe
can
we
wait.
cannot.
If you can wait 150 days to cancel the order for your wedding dress. It's coming from Australia?
Yeah, but
from
don't
Australia.
worry. Australia's paying for that.
Is it made of kangaroo
right.
skin? Why does it need to
No.
come from Australia?
Because that, you know what's crazy? When we were trying on a bajillion dresses, because I
Yeah.
tried on a bajillion dresses.
Who's we and who else was trying
Me,
on dresses?
I was just me. But there were other people
the
present
royal you
to
were
watch
trying
me
on
do
dresses?
this. There are so many wedding dress designers that come from Australia. I don't know what they're doing over there, but there are a lot of them.
The Dingo Dress Company?
Yeah, that we did not get to that one.
Dingo
There's a
ate
lot
my
of
wedding
them.
dress.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway,
Wow. That is so interesting. Aren't you all at home fascinated by this discourse? Let's move on. A rabbi walked into the New York Times
oh gosh,
and said, "Can I write an op-ed?" Rabbi Shai
Held.
Held.
Isn't that from June?
I think it's a wrestling move. I don't know. Sure, it's from somewhere. Shai Held is president and dean of the Hayter Institute, an author most recently of the book Judaism is About Love. He wrote a piece in the New York Times talking about the title is one of the Bible's greatest moral revolutions, and believe it or not, it touches on the popular topic of immigration. He says the Bible explicitly commands 3 loves. The first and second, many modern Christians and Jews cite easily: love of God and love of one's neighbor. The third, and most often overlooked, is love of the ger.
The what?
Here.
Girl?
Ger.
No.
You don't have the article in front of you?
I'm pulling it up right now.
Gare.
G-E-R.
Jur? You sure it's not jur?
I've always
G-E-R.
heard gare.
Gare? Gur?
It's a Hebrew word.
Yeah.
It's a Hebrew word, and it's who we're supposed to love is the ger.
I think maybe we could just translate it.
Do you love the ger? Well,
into English.
that's the question. Several English translations interpret ger as sojourner, someone born elsewhere who has come to dwell among the people, most likely temporarily. Other translations render ger as stranger, alien, or foreigner. Well, those are all similar. I guess sojourner is a little different because they're just moving through.
Not vermin or poison to the blood of our culture?
I think you're jumping ahead. The commandment to love immigrants, he believes that immigrant is actually the most accurate. In fact, the 11th century Jewish biblical commentator, are you up on your 11th century Jewish biblical commentators?
I've dabbled.
Rashi.
Isn't he a children's music performer?
That was Rafi.
Rafi.
Yes.
Right, yeah.
Explains that wherever ger occurs in scriptures, it signifies a person who has not been born in that land where he is living, but has come from another country to sojourn there. So it's close to immigrant. The commandment to love immigrants is one of the Bible's greatest moral revolutions, he says. Other ancient Near Eastern cultures instructed people to care for widows and orphans. The Bible expands the category of those who deserve special protection to include those who live among our community but are not quite of it. He says, Rabbi Shai says, there's no one-to-one correspondence between the biblical mandate to love the immigrant and the question of how many immigrants the United States should take in over a given year. This is true. The Bible does not specify immigration policy. But, and this is a big but, this does not mean that the Bible has nothing to say to our present moment. On the contrary, the Bible offers an ethos, an approach we might take in confronting immigration policy. Those of us who follow the Bible as a moral guide can conclude that demonizing, mocking, or dehumanizing immigrants, let alone violently pursuing them, is, religiously speaking, an abomination. A direct affront to a biblical vision of what a good and holy society ought to look like. Xenophobia is then, spiritually speaking, an illness, a failure to see people as God does, to treat them as God demands they be treated. Okay, so pretty compelling argument that we can't demonize immigrants, even if we don't like them.
Yep.
Even if they're touching our stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Even if maybe I could get that job I've been longing for of working in fields 20 hours a day, but I can't get it because there are too many immigrants. Even if I can't pursue my occupation, we can't demonize immigrants.
Is this difficult for people to grasp?
So here's my question, and I'm going to ask Caitlin because I think she might be better constitutionally suited to answer.
Okay. That's a backhanded compliment, isn't it?
What's the best phrasing of the argument against this?
Oh, you're going to her for the MAGA point of view.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not for it, but for the best attempt at a steel manning of why someone who takes the Bible seriously would say, I disagree with Shia LaBeouf.
I think a couple of things. One, the argument he makes at the beginning about how to translate this word, I agree with the whole of this article, but I do think
we probably assume that.
Yeah.
So,
I do. Just saying it, before I say something else. But this whole thing of like, if you translate it the right way, then you'll kind of come to a different position, I don't think is fair. And I don't think he's really saying that, but I think someone might read him that way. The real question is not how you translate this one word. The question is how you translate this moral guidance for a particular community that is governed ultimately by God to a community that is governed not by God, that is accountable to God, but is not given directly from God the laws that should govern its constituency. And I think the reply to this would be a couple of things. One, people would go to Romans 13 and say, you're supposed to obey the law. And so it's not wrong at all for a country to enforce its laws. And sometimes enforcing those laws when the law is you are not supposed to legally be in the country, the way that you enforce that is by removing those people from the country. Now, I don't think that there is a good argument I can make for taking that argument and moving all the way to you should mock, dehumanize, violently assault immigrants who have broken the law. I think the only way you get there is by believing that first point and then marinating in media that teaches you to fear and dehumanize those people that you dislike. There is a biblical argument to be made. Possibly, it's not one that I entirely agree with, but there's a biblical argument to be made for immigration policy that is much harsher than the one that I would support. I would disagree, and I would have biblical arguments for why I would want something different. But I think you can make a biblical argument for the whole kind of concept of the nation state that exists today did not exist when Israel was given these laws. So even translating, ger into immigrant or, foreigner, that's not the only issue here. It's the issue of how do you translate what it meant to be a foreigner traveling in another land at the time to what it means to cross national borders today. You can make an argument for why the Bible would say actually more than kind of caring for migrants on the level that the Old Testament and New Testament speak to. More than that, what really matters for U.S. policy is you're supposed to obey the law. If you obey the law, it says in Romans 13, like God has given government the ability to enact with force those laws that they've put in place. People have broken the law when they've immigrated illegally, and so they should face the consequences for that. Now, I think outside of Scripture, most people should say, okay, how do you hold those two things together? If the Bible says you should obey the law, but the Bible also says you should care for foreigners, and the Bible also says in the Old Testament, nations are judged by how they treat foreigners, not just individuals or churches, which don't exist in the Old Testament, but whole nations are judged that way, not just the people of God, but other nations. How you hold that together then is where you get the difficulty we're in now of the Bible does not prescribe a particular policy, but I do think it requires us to have a better system than the one we have today, which both harms people materially and then is often propagated by people who explicitly want to dehumanize those that are harmed by it.
Skye, do you feel constitutionally prepared to enter the conversation now?
I do.
Okay, you may enter.
And I would like to point out that Caitlin gave a very thorough, nuanced, and thoughtful reflection on this, which is precisely why you would not work well in MAGA media world.
Sorry, yeah.
The simple answer to your question, Phil.
And your immediate desire to say something disparaging about MAGA media world is why I asked her to go first.
Yes, I know.
Yeah.
I think the simple answer to your question of what is the steelman argument against this article is simple. The people that we are against, I'm speaking on behalf of that point of view, the people we are against are not immigrants. They are not sojourners. They are not aliens. They are invaders.
Oh, right.
And therefore, all these Old Testament commands about loving them do not apply any more than they would have applied to the Philistines or the Hittites or the Canaanites or all the other groups that ancient Israel fought wars against. So if they are invaders meaning us harm, then the appropriate thing for the government to do is to fight fire with fire, eye for an eye, and use whatever force necessary.
Because so many came in a short period of time.
They are invaders because that's what Fox News has said they are.
Well, that seems like an underwrought argument.
I agree.
Right there. But I'll let that one. Okay.
Well, one thing I just want to add is one of the real sadnesses of the whole immigration debate, which we've talked about so many times, is that there are often on offer in public such extremes. And whether those extremes are the actual positions of most people or not, the way that it's presented by both sides is does not capture what most Americans actually want. Most Americans really want fair, equitable, compassionate immigration policy. But the left says that the right only wants to lock up kids in cages, which some people do, and that's abominable. But a lot of people do not. And then people on the right say everyone on the left just wants to let everyone in and never deport anyone and most people I know on the left want to deport violent criminals who have come illegally, and they want there to be requirements you have to meet to enter the country, but they also want there to be less of a horrifically complicated system that makes it impossible for anyone to enter legally in a good way. Most people want a better system than this, and most politicians don't want a better system than this because they benefit off of all of the talking points of critiquing each other.
I also think it's important to, what I would add, and this is a wonderful article from a Jewish point of view, and I think he's correct. The love for one another and the addition of loving for the stranger or the alien among us is an innovation of the Judeo ethic from the Old Testament law. But when you get to the New Testament, it goes an even step further. And that is, even if you want to believe the rhetoric that people coming to this country are quote unquote invaders, even that doesn't get you off the hook if you are a Christian of loving them, because Jesus calls us to even love those we consider our enemies.
But that's as individuals.
No, it isn't.
It's not when we all decide things together as governments.
No, it isn't. It's because this is why even secular nations influenced deeply by Christian heritage in the West give human rights even to combatants in war and criminals and things like we have laws on what is cruel and unusual punishment, even for those who are guilty, because we recognize that even criminals, even invaders, even our enemies in wartime have human rights and are worthy of dignity.
But isn't that how the West is committing suicide?
Some would say so, that we need to jettison these soft Christian ideas that humanize and dignify our enemies.
A little less Jesus, a little more Nietzsche, if we want to preserve Christian civilization.
Some are saying that,
which kind of confuses me.
My point is, if you want to hold your Christian identity and do these things, they are in contradiction with each other.
Well, what's more important, Christian identity or Christian practice?
I don't think you can do one without the other.
Yeah.
But if you had to choose, you'd rather be seen as a Christian as a label than behave.
At the end of the Sermon on the Mount,
as a Christian,
Jesus said, "The one who hears these words of mine and obeys them is like the man who builds his house on the rock." So it's the one who actually obeys that matters, not the one who has the label.
Yeah.
And there's a whole parable about this, right?
Yeah, Romans 13.
No. The parable that Jesus gives where a father tells two of his sons to do some work in the field. Right. One says he will and doesn't. The other says that he won't and does. And Jesus says which one actually did the will of the Father.
But
the one who did.
No, I agree. I'm trying to talk about how someone would twist it to justify not doing it anyway.
We don't need to give them any ideas.
No, we don't.
Okay,
no, we
so
don't.
Speaking of, and this is, there's I think some honest confusion and grayness about the role of government versus the role of individual versus the role, like the spheres.
Yes.
You know, the personal, the family, the church, the civic. And so some people complain that, you know, the federal government should be still acting like they believe in Christian principles. Others say the federal government doesn't need to apply Christian principles, but should protect Christianity. So, because that gets me to my next story, which is, you remember when USAID got cut up with a chainsaw by Elon Musk, U.S. Department of Aid? According to an internal State Department email obtained by The Atlantic just last week, the administration will soon, turns out some parts of it weren't quite dead yet, so we're circling back to kill them. The administration will soon end all of the humanitarian funding it is currently providing as part of a, quote, responsible exit from 7 African nations, and redirect funding in 9 others. Aid programs in all of these countries had previously been up for renewal from now through the end of September, but will instead be allowed to expire. Each of these aid programs is classified as life-saving, according to the Trump administration. So the administration has already canceled the entire aid packages of 2 nations, Afghanistan and Yemen, where the State Department said terrorists were diverting resources. The new email sent on February 12th makes no such claims about the 7 countries now losing all humanitarian aid: Burkina Faso, Cameroon, Malawi, Mali, Niger, Somalia, and Zimbabwe. Instead, according to the email, and this is the rationale, this is what I wanted to bring up, the rationale for canceling the aid, all humanitarian aid to these countries, because, quote, there is no strong nexus between the humanitarian response and U.S. national interests, unquote. So a secular government or a Nietzschean-inspired government, you would say, yeah, that makes sense.
How is Trump's new ballroom and his giant arch in national interest?
Because we need one. Glory. Because big countries should have big, beautiful, shiny things like Arcs de Triomphe in your honor. But, okay, so I'm raising this because it makes sense. Hey, that's not in our national interest, so we're not going to do it. Unless you say we're living according to the Christian inheritance of the West, which we say we want to defend, which believes in looking out for the least of these.
I don't know if I'm with you.
Okay. Where are you?
Yeah.
Skye.
Well, I mean, yeah, as a Christian, I look at these aid programs and I can see through a Christian lens why this is good. We are a very wealthy country. We have the capacity to help people in need. We ought to do that. I'm not sure that's why we're doing it, though. And I mean,
there's self-interest.
There is absolutely
everything.
self-interest in it. And you could argue back in the 20th century, we were in a global PR battle with the Soviet Union and communism. Yeah. And it was in our self-interest to help these poorer countries with aid so that they would be positively predisposed towards Western values, alignment with the United States, things like that. Well, we are still in a global competition, more so with China. And China is making massive inroads in Latin America, South America, Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, and where the United States pulls back its involvement and its aid and its economic influence and other.
China runs in.
We've seen it happen over and over and over again. So I think you can make a case that there's a strong nexus, as they put it, for national interest.
So should Christians, when they work all together through representative government, justify everything with self-interest? Or does a country ever do anything that's purely to help others? Or is that not the role of government?
I don't think you can segregate it that easily, because sometimes things can be of self-interest and be genuinely good for the poor, or you know, so it's messy at times. And if individuals have different reasons for supporting something that we as Christians would say is good, okay.
And you can't separate it even in a kind of metaphysical sense. Like, so many of the instructions in Scripture about how you treat other nations, how you treat foreigners, how you treat the poor, teach not just a moral lesson about how the people of God should respond. The Old Testament very often is giving those kinds of instructions to nations that are not Israel and are not doing this because they are God's people. But there is a principle that we are both interconnected and morally shaped by how we treat other people. So even if there's not a clear separation between it's in your self-interest in terms of foreign policy and it's in this like selfless interest to help other people, the like all of the things that Skye is talking about are proof that those two things are kind of like wrapped up together practically. But also much of America's history of thinking of ourselves as a Christian nation, or even this phrase that Trump has ironically been like the first president in a very long time to not use very well, this shining city on a hill, was not just, I mean, it was very often ironically about being such a, prosperous and moral place that other people wanted to come and we wanted them to come, but also that America was a moral exemplar, not just militarily powerful or economically powerful, but that how we treated the poor in other countries was an example to other people, and that example, like living in a world where individuals, communities, and nations help those that are vulnerable, is a world that everyone wants to live in. Like, that's a better world for everyone.
This is a weird metaphor.
So you're saying Christians should want to improve the world?
Hot take. Yeah, I think so.
But it's gonna burn.
If you see an image of a let's say a man late at night feeding a bottle to a baby, it's
progressive.
Right.
Okay. Does he know how? Is he qualified?
Let's just say you see this image.
Okay.
You don't know the motivations of that man. It could be the baby's crying and hungry, and then deep compassion goes and wants to feed that child. It could be that man is exhausted and wants to go to bed, and feeding the kid is going to help him go to sleep so he can go to sleep. Now, at the end of the day, I'm just glad that baby's being fed.
Yeah.
The deeper motivation sometimes I can't see or know, but it's a good thing in itself. And similarly with foreign aid and different things we do around the world, you could argue, well, that's in bad motive or that's in good motive. Okay, but some things are just good.
And I think it's really important. We've said this before in the show, but I think it's worth reiterating, especially in the Old Testament, but it pops up again in the New Testament as well. Even though it's sometimes really hard for us to tell what moral teachings in Scripture should apply to us personally, should apply to our churches, should apply to the government, there are some that it's very clear because the Old Testament has many prophecies. Most prophecies are for the nation of Israel, and they're prophecies against their injustice and idolatry and mistreatment of people. But very many prophecies, like a surprising amount of prophecies, are not directed towards or really against Israel. They're directed against the nations that are not God's people, that have not been given God's law, that are not judged for failing to keep the sacrifices that Israel is required to keep, or the festivals Israel is required to keep. They're never judged for that. Israel's judged for that, for failing to keep God's law. The nations are not judged for failing to keep God's law. They're judged for failing to keep the covenant that's made with Noah and all of creation, which requires that you treat those in God's image in certain ways, which is why all those prophecies against the nations are about enslaving people, mistreating the poor, mistreating the foreigner. So I think even if you want to take a real self-interested take on this, like, we should be, and I often think this, like, we should be concerned that we as a nation will be judged by God for how we treat foreigners or for how we treat the poor, which is how nations in the Old Testament are judged. In a similar way, you can't really separate what of that is like a moral desire to keep God's commands and what is self-interest, because God has said he will judge us for failing to keep those commands.
There's always a self-interest component.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think what I took away from that article was partly just the phrase, those of us who follow the Bible as a moral guide can conclude that demonizing, mocking, or dehumanizing immigrants is, religiously speaking, an abomination. When you put it in those terms, because we like to throw around abomination when we're talking about social sins that we don't like, that other people are doing. You know, you that is an abomination, what you are doing. But to say it's that attitude that you have toward the Somali community in Minnesota is an abomination in God's nostrils.
Don't you think, though, I mean, apart from the they're not immigrants or invaders argument, the other argument for this, or for cutting foreign aid, is the presence of these immigrants among us, or the sending of this money to foreign countries to help the poor there, prevents us from caring for our neighbors here. Right? It isn't that I hate immigrants, it's that I want to love my neighbor better. It's not that I hate the poor people in Zimbabwe, it's I want that money going to help Americans here. So they pit one group against another, or one love against another.
I just challenge you to find someone who is making that argument that I want the money to come back and help people here. To find someone who makes that argument and supports single-payer healthcare, or almost any other use of tax dollars to help.
I'm obviously not supporting this argument, but I think it's the one I've heard the most.
I have found it to be a red herring. Okay, moving on. I'm glad we figured some stuff out.
Yep, solve that one.
I'm glad we figured out that dehumanizing immigrants actually isn't biblical.
Great.
And America, you're welcome. We've solved that one. Let's talk about our friend Ryan Burge, who's on every now and then, and is probably now the leading studier of data about Christians and the church. That's a title.
He should put that on his business card.
I am a great studier.
His Substack is Graphs About Religion.
Graphs About Religion. He's talking, he very often talks about nuns, and we've quoted him a lot when talking about nuns. This is not about nuns, and it's not about priests. This is about non-denoms.
Non-denoms.
Non-denoms. People in non-denominational churches.
Phenomena.
A non-denom.
No.
I was gonna do that. I was gonna do
Were
that.
you really?
Yeah, I was.
You had that planned.
I had that in my mind already, but thanks for ruining.
I've been really binging on Muppet stuff on Instagram lately.
Did you watch the new Muppet show?
I haven't seen it yet, but
it's good.
I adore Pepe the King Prawn.
Pepe.
I don't even know
Oh
what
my
we're talking
gosh.
about
Do you
right
know
now.
what Muppets are, Caitlin?
Yes.
Do you know what the Muppet Show,
I know.
Caitlin? Then how
No.
could you don't know the Muppet Show? The thing that made the Muppets famous?
That was like the 1970s.
It was. I know you weren't there
I
to
know
watch
A Christmas
it.
Carol.
Oh,
The
you know
Muppet
the
Christmas
movies
I know,
they
yeah,
made in
yeah,
the
yeah,
90s.
yeah,
You know the
yeah.
Muppet movies they made in
I
the
do.
90s.
That's what I know.
Okay, they had a hit TV show in the 70s, second half of the 70s. Anyway,
even know.
they made a new episode of it, but just one, like a 30-minute.
But they're all over Instagram, like little clips of them doing weird stuff.
Yeah, they do lots of social media stuff.
Yeah, they're pretty savvy
Because
with
social
that.
media stuff is pretty easy to do with puppets. It doesn't take nearly as long.
Maybe we should do that, Phil. Or really,
Where would we get the puppets?
You should do that.
We're looking at non-denoms.
Right.
The share of all Protestants who were non-denominational in 1972 was just 5%. Today,
That's
about
wild.
30% of Protestants are non-denominational. Now, in general, would you say that trend is because we don't like being under authority or being associated with big groups and we don't want to be part of clubs anymore?
I have a different theory.
Yeah.
Oh, what's your theory?
I mean, I think it's true. Everything you said is true, but I think the bigger motivator is, there's a lot. I don't.
No, thanks.
Well,
I think we are. Evangelical subculture in America, especially, is so personality driven that people get attached to a leader, not a denomination.
Right.
They want it personified in the pastor on the platform.
And if you are a charismatic and or entrepreneurial personality, you don't really want to be in part of somebody else's company.
Yes.
You want to start your own thing.
Bingo.
But now it's been, if you look back to the founding of Willow and some of the other early big non-denominational megachurches, we've got multiple generations that have grown up without any knowledge of connection to a denomination, where there's not
but there's lots of non-denoms that function like denoms.
What do you mean?
Like multi-site.
Yeah, multi-site networks.
They're organizations.
Yes, well, even like the Willow Creek Association is like, well, we're all part of. We kind of have a shared philosophy of ministry and outlook, and all. We share resources.
But did they kick other churches out for their theology?
No, because they weren't bound by theology.
Right. I don't want to be bound.
Right.
This is the other thing, because I mean, the ethos of like, I don't like big institutions. I don't like someone telling me what to do. That's as old as America. Like you could say, why did we have such an age of denominations in America? I think a lot of the story right now is also not only the kind of fundamentalist modernist split of like, you've got two Presbyterian denominations that are kind of the conservatives and the liberals. You've got two Methodists. You've got now even those are splitting more and more and more over sexuality things and gender things. And like, so you've got, when they're proliferating around and most of them seem like they don't actually do anything because there's only one church in your whole state that's part of this, very specific denomination. All of a sudden, if you're trying to start a church or join a church, you're probably not trying to do it based off of these like very shrinking denominations.
Right. And if you are an entrepreneurial leader who is charismatic in the pulpit, you're going to be able to build a good-sized church very quickly. And if you're new to an area and you've got kids and you want to be able to seg into something that's all set up and looks like it's well run. And
I remember when I was at CT, we were looking at data about how people pick a church. And I don't have it to cite in front of me, but denominations used to be set up because if, let's say you grew up Methodist and you move across the country, you go to a new town, you go to the Methodist church.
Right.
Because Methodists all believe these things and they all practice them these ways. Nowadays, people tend to pick a church. They have no idea what the doctrine of the church is.
Yes.
It's, do I like the speaking? Do I like the music? Are the programs good for my kids? And are the people around me in this church my kind of people?
Right.
And you have no idea what their doctrinal beliefs are or their heritage. So once you've eliminated the things that defined a denomination as being important for choosing a church, you get growth of non-denominationalism.
You've got a list of social and political things you're looking to make sure they doctrinally believe more than a bunch of theological things. Yeah.
So the biggest denomination is now not. In real numbers, that translates to roughly 45 million non-denoms in the United States. For comparison, the Southern Baptist Convention has about 12.5 million members, and the Catholic Church has about 62 million. So Protestants, biggest group of Protestants, are Protestants that are not in a denomination. And this is what is interesting as he dives into the data, because he concludes that non-denoms may be the future of American Christianity. They have age on their side. Non-denoms are noticeably younger than many of the largest denominations in the United States, and they have a substantial share of younger adults in their congregations who will help offset losses from the baby boomers getting older. Second, why
is that so funny?
I'm sorry.
Funny.
I was reading further down and he says belief in a literal Bible has crept up slowly over time. I think he means like biblical literalism. But I was like, is there a subset of Christians that don't believe
in a literal
that a literal Bible is there?
No, you mean there literally is a Bible?
There's
literally? It's not just I thought it was just a metaphor.
It's a very Gen Z way of speaking.
Yeah. Ryan.
Sorry, I shouldn't read ahead.
We got you, Ryan. Okay, let me repeat. First, they have age on their side. Second, non-denoms are more racially diverse, especially among young adults. In many ways, non-denoms already look a lot like the future of America. So the Catholic Church is more racially diverse, although most of that diversity is Latino Catholics, whereas non-denoms have much more Black and other racial minorities, and actually less Latino. And then finally, when it comes to attendance and belief, it's fair to say that non-denoms are moving toward the evangelical median. Attendance has risen significantly, and the share who literally believe in the Bible, not the Bible is a literal thing, has increased in a meaningful way over time. In short, the future of American evangelicalism may not be found in the Southern Baptist Convention or the Assemblies of God. It may be non-denom. Is that good? Bad? Indifferent?
Pick your poison.
Half 6 of one, half dozen.
Yeah, I think it's messy.
Okay. And now for a point of view not shaded by cynicism, it's Caitlin.
I mean, I don't think it's good. Along the
That's
lines
just
of what...
because you think you're a Presbyterian now. And
I
so,
do. I mean, I think everyone should be a Presbyterian. No, I don't think that. But I
we just have to pick which of the 12 Presbyterian variants.
Yeah, well, that's a whole other thing. I mean,
like COVID.
To possibly articulate Skye's just like grumblings over there, I don't want to say that one way or the other is
I believe they're groanings of the Holy Spirit.
Okay. I don't want to say that one way or the other is like better for the church with certainty, because I don't know. And the Spirit can move in lots of ways, and it typically moves in ways that are not the ones that I would lay out in advance or the ones I would prefer or guess. But I do think it has been good for many Christians and for many churches for them to belong to a visible church that is larger than themselves. We all belong to the invisible church that's larger than ourselves, that spans the world and time. And yet many people have pointed out the more connected you are to a particular church, and I would say a particular denomination or tradition, actually it's often easier from that place to be connected to the wider, broader church, because it's not just this big abstract idea. Like there was a lot of hand-wringing for many generations over denominationalism, and the ecumenical movement was very focused on kind of getting over our differences. And I think it both is a harm to us that we don't care as much about some of these theological distinctives. We care more about political or cultural issues. But I also think it doesn't help our churches be healthier or stronger, or Christians be more connected to and obligated to their churches, for us to increasingly have no larger denominational accountability, no larger denominational structure for using money well, no larger denominational structure for guiding the theology of a church. Like, it can go wrong in very significant ways. There have been, abuse scandals in the Catholic Church, one of the most hierarchical, Christian traditions. And yet there are real gifts to a denomination as a whole, saying from within the kind of portion of Christianity that we inhabit, the tradition that we are a part of, let's work out some of the theological questions that are specific to our tradition. Let's really kind of proclaim to the larger church the goodness of some of our distinctives that maybe they don't agree with, or maybe they don't emphasize as much. There are real goods to being with other Christians that share some really important distinctives and being shaped by each other, and from that place of belonging, interacting with Christians and non-Christians who are coming from a different place than you. And I think we lose something the more that we are apart from those denominations, and to Skye's point, the more that we are shaped by kind of personality-driven churches and networks that don't have a lot of accountability to them, or don't have a lot of theological distinctives holding them together. There's pros and cons, but I just think I increasingly have seen, and in my own life have seen, the way that non-denominational churches can lose a lot, both theologically and accountability-wise.
Here's the metaphor I would use. I did a Skye pod recently talking about the value of redundancy. And the metaphor being commercial aircraft are engineered with a lot of redundant systems for safety reasons, multiple engines, multiple pilots, multiple hydraulic systems, all those kinds of things. Any plane can crash. But a plane that doesn't have redundancy is a more fragile aircraft, and it's more susceptible to catastrophic problems. So I'm not saying if you're part of a denominational church, you're going to be just fine.
Right.
It can be abused. Totally. Terrible things can happen, all that. A non-denominational church has fewer redundancies, fewer backups, which makes it an inherently more fragile system that is more prone to abuse and calamity. That's just...
And also, it's the future.
Yes, which is very fragile.
Which, to be fair,
yes.
I mean, Reinberg is making a good argument in terms of demographics and age. But what this tells us is what the numbers are. It can't tell us
You don't know what's going to happen.
We can't. It both can't tell us to get really pious what God will do.
Because once upon a time, demographics were the future of the Democratic Party.
Yeah, it was inevitable.
It was
just going to happen. We don't know. We don't know what will happen.
But I do think this whole trend, I would love to talk to Ryan about this more, but this is an interesting little glimpse into American Christianity, but it's a much larger trend. And that is, I'd argue for the last 40 or 50 years, America overall has so emphasized efficiency.
Yeah.
In all of our institutions, it has made our entire society more fragile. We see that in government. We see that in economics. We see that in corporations. We see that in the stock market, education, and here you see it in denomination or non-denominationalism. Everything's more fragile because it's easier and more efficient, and we will pay a price for it.
And they put on a better show.
Yes.
At the end of the day, you have to admit it's pretty impressive.
Until it implodes.
Until it implodes. Okay. Hey, everybody. Fun week in the news. Who knows what's going to happen next week? We just don't know. Until then, it's just data. It's just data. Thanks for listening. Thanks for listening every week. Thanks for supporting us. Go to HOLYPOST.com. Check out HOLYPOST Plus. There's new stuff. Skye, you guys just did something on what did you say? Skye did something on redundancy. You guys together did something on
Harry Potter.
Harry Potter.
Yeah. There's got like 100 responses just on HOLYPOST Plus.
Okay, we're going to have to follow up. Are people mad?
They don't like me.
You know, Harry Potter's been out for a while.
Yeah,
It's been out for a while.
Caitlin's just discovered it.
I just recently read it.
Yeah,
I just recently read it.
that's why we talked about it.
Wow, you got to become a member just to find out what Caitlin thought of her first exposure to Harry Potter.
And Phil, we're actually doing a 1-week free trial right now.
No
so
way.
people
Oh my
can figure out
goodness.
what
Where do
Caitlin
I
thinks.
go to learn about the 1
Go
week
to
free trial?
holypost.com/plus. And right there, it'll direct you to the 1 week free trial to sign up at any subscription level.
Plus spelled out PLUS or
That's,
plus sign?
Spelled out PLUS.
Holypost.com/PLUS. Plus. Or Plus in French. Canal Plus is the biggest French broadcaster. It's Channel Plus. There you go. All right, we'll see you next week. Bye.
HOLYPOST is sponsored by Hiya Health. We're learning more and more about the impact of ultra-processed food on our kids' health, and it isn't great. Hiya exists to give parents a real solution in a market full of kids' vitamins that focus more on candy-like appeal than actual nutrition. Hiya Kids Vitamins have 0 sugar, 0 gummy additives, just clean nutrition, and kids love them. It's the pediatrician-approved super-powered chewable vitamin for kids, with 15 essential vitamins and minerals to help support immunity, energy, brain function, mood, concentration, and more. Designed for kids 2 and up, Hiya ships straight to your door. You get an awesome reusable bottle with your first order, and then they send environmentally friendly refills every month. We've worked out a special deal with Hiya for their best-selling children's vitamin. Receive 50% off your first order. To claim this deal, you must go to hiyahealth.com/holypost. This deal is not available on their regular website. Go to HAYAHEALTH.com/holypost and get your kids the full body nourishment they need to grow into healthy adults. Today's episode is sponsored by Bushnell University. Do you want to lead faithfully in a chaotic world? Bushnell University's Masters of Arts in Theology and Culture is designed to equip Christians, pastors, ministry leaders, and workplace believers to be transformative in their communities. Guided by Dr. A.J. Swoboda. You may recognize him from episode 454 when he talked to Skye about deconstruction and doubt. Dr. Swoboda guides this 2-year program that blends deep theological formation with practical learning. With 2 immersive week-long residencies and flexible online coursework, you'll learn how to be resilient and lead others into deeper faith. Learn more at bushnell.edu and start your journey today. That's BUSHNELL.edu. HOLYPOST is sponsored by DripDrop. There are a lot of things I can do to improve my health. Good hydration is one of the few that make an instant difference. DripDrop is proven fast hydration, trusted by firefighters, medical professionals, and over 90% of top college and pro sports teams because it's engineered to hydrate you faster and more effectively than water alone. And they just dropped Zero Sugar Plus, a breakthrough formula with an advanced blend of 6 key electrolytes, 15 essential vitamins and nutrients, and no sugar or artificial sweeteners. Make good hydration part of your daily routine with DripDrop. You'll feel results fast while getting 3 times the electrolytes electrolytes of leading sports drinks, 16 original flavors, and 8 zero sugar plus options. Right now, DripDrop is offering podcast listeners 20% off your first order. Go to DripDrop.com and use promo code HOLYPOST. That's DripDrop.com, promo code HOLYPOST for 20% off. Stock up now at DripDrop.com and use promo code HOLYPOST.
I've been following and reading Father James Martin for years. I think I first discovered him through his book, The Jesuit Guide to Almost Everything. I was drawn to the book because I've been intrigued by Jesuit spirituality since my college years. And James Martin has been one of the most visible Jesuits in the U.S. as the editor-at-large for America magazine. He also serves as a counselor to the Vatican's Dicastery for Communications. Basically, that means he's someone who often represents the Catholic Church in secular media. You've probably seen him on many news programs or on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. His new book is called Work in Progress: Confessions of a Busboy, Dishwasher, Caddy, Usher, Factory Worker, Bank Teller, Corporate Tool, and Priest. It's a coming-of-age memoir about Martin's journey through his teen and young adult years. In our conversation, we discussed the shift from working for GE to entering the priesthood, the links between Jesuit spirituality and Protestantism, and we both geek out a little bit about the story of Jesus and the Samaritan woman at the well in John 4. I've also recorded a bonus interview with James Martin exclusively for HOLYPOST Plus subscribers. In that conversation, I asked him about his advocacy for LGBTQ Catholics and the differences between how Catholics and evangelicals have approached this issue. So if you want access to that, you got to get yourself signed up for HOLYPOST Plus. Go to holypost.com/plus to learn how to do that. Here is my conversation with James Martin. Father James Martin, welcome to the Holy Post.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I'm delighted to have you. I've wanted to have you on for a long time. I've read many of your books and a fan of your work. Your latest is Work in Progress: Confessions of a Busboy, Dishwasher, Caddy, Usher, Factory Worker, Bank Teller, Corporate Tool, and Priest. The book is on the New York Times bestsellers list. Congratulations on that. Fascinating read. It's more of a memoir than your previous works have been. I want to talk a little bit about your childhood and the home you grew up in and what kind of faith you practiced as a kid and how that, we'll get to how you entered into the priesthood and changed. But what was your faith like growing up?
Yeah, I would say that I was a member of a family of, what St. Paul would call lukewarm Catholics. I know he said he'd spit anything out that's lukewarm. But my family were Catholic. I was baptized Catholic. I had my first communion. I was confirmed, all that. We went to Mass, I would say most Sundays. But if we missed Mass, it wasn't a big deal. But we didn't pray at home. We didn't talk about God. I didn't go to a Catholic school. We didn't do a lot of the devotional practices that Catholics do, devout Catholics. So, just kind of lukewarm. And then, that continued through my teenage years and college years until, I started to take it more seriously. But I wasn't from one of those families that said, my son, the priest.
Right.
In fact, they were kind of upset when I entered. So it's, one of the things I say in the book is that it's a reminder of how God can work through anybody's life.
I resonate with that. I'm obviously not a priest, but when I went into seminary, it precipitated months of arguments with my father. So it was not something that was welcome necessarily. You talk in the book about on the title, you talk about being a corporate tool. You went to business school and you worked for GE in the 1980s. Talk about that experience. I think you describe it as soul crushing. What was so soul crushing about that as a young man?
It's funny. That's the phrase that people have sort of keyed in on. Business is a real vocation for a lot of people. I want to start out by saying that. And probably a lot of your listeners work in some sort of business, right? And many of my friends at General Electric, formerly great company, now sort of split up and, more or less atomized into several different parts. Continued with their careers at General Electric for years, and just right through their retirement and, contributed to the common good and lived fulfilling lives. But it just wasn't for me. And, I talk about episodes in the book where I ran into situations where, people were pretty immoral. And again, that doesn't mean everyone was immoral. Most people were great people and very kind and nice and moral. But there was enough immoral behavior and emphasis on the bottom line, sometimes cruelty, that it made me question, what I was doing there. And eventually I thought, I can't stay anymore. This is not for me.
In that same season, you intersected with the work of Thomas Merton. Was that your introduction to the thought of a deeper spiritual Catholic life, or was that percolating beforehand?
That's a good way of saying that. I would say that, as I say in the book's pretty lighthearted. Most of the summer job's kind of fun, but the book takes a bit of a turn when a friend of mine was killed in an automobile accident when we were both juniors in college at the University of Pennsylvania. And I stopped believing in God, or just stopped going to church, and just said, I'm not going to believe in the God that kills my friends, until I ran into a friend of mine who was evangelical Christian at Penn at the time. And I told her, sort of with some anger, that I didn't believe in God anymore. I remember exactly where it happened. And she said, well, I've been using the last few months to thank God for Brad's life. That was the name of our friend. And, to be honest, that was kind of the shift for me from an evangelical Christian who basically, without saying it this way, invited me to move from a transactional understanding of God, right? If I do this, God will do that, into an understanding of God, as I said, a belief in a God that I may not understand. So that was a bit of a shift. And then when I encountered the writings of Thomas Merton, the Trappist monk, it was an invitation into, I would say, a sort of serious adult Christianity. Because I think when I was young, it was all about, if I do the right thing, if I'm a good boy, God will reward me.
Right.
And so that, I think life is a little more complex than that.
Yeah, I think a lot of folks listening to this are going to have had a similar experience, maybe not as tragic, that awakened them, but a realization that the transactional faith, or in some evangelical circles, we might talk about the prosperity gospel kind of posture, eventually breaks down. It just doesn't work. And you enter into a kind of holy agnosticism where there's a sacredness to it, but you're going, I don't understand this thing anymore, and I don't know where to go with it.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because, we see so many examples of good people who suffer, right? And good people who suffer, we talk about prosperity. I mean, sometimes it's connected to simple financial gain, but we see plenty of situations where very good people, very devout, very prayerful, and very faithful people fall in hard times. And it's not because they did something. There's that great scene, I think it's John 9, where, who sinned, Lord, that this man was born blind? He says, no one. Mm-hmm. So I always say that should be enough. If Jesus is telling us that should be enough.
So when I was a college student, I studied comparative religion and history at a state university, and I was kind of wandering in my own faith at the time, having come from more of a Baptist sort of evangelical background. And through a philosophy professor, I started reading more Catholics, beginning with, I think Henry Nouwen was the first one that I kind of found. But that led me down a whole strange trail of St. John of the Cross, Ignatius Loyola, Thomas à Kempis, even more contemporaries like Mother Teresa, Pope John Paul II. It was a great expansion of my understanding of things. You end up as a Jesuit, which is a tradition that I was super intrigued by even as a college student, although I never considered converting to Catholicism or entering the priesthood. What was it about Jesuit spirituality that drew you?
Well, that makes it sound like I sort of did some sort of search, but it was kind of providential. I came into contact with the writings of Thomas Merton. I was miserable at GE, and that sort of gave me a way out. And I thought, my gosh, maybe I'd like to be a priest or a monk or join a religious order. And I talked to my local parish priest, who I had never talked to. I mean, I listened to his homilies and said, nice homily on the way out. But I went up to him one day and I said, I think I'd like to be a priest. And he said, you should talk to the local diocese, the local, Catholic, geographic organization where there's a seminary. And he said, you might as well talk to the Jesuits at Fairfield University, which was up the street. I was living in Stamford, Connecticut. I mean, that was just an aside. You might as well talk. They're close by. And I met them and it seemed to click with me. Now, in a lot of other situations, Catholics who join religious orders do an extensive search. They look at the Franciscans, the Benedictines, the Dominicans. These are naming some Catholic religious orders, and then they discern with them. I just found the Jesuits clicked with me and, really never looked back. So really it was providence. Now, what drew me was that Jesuits can do lots of things. So I'm a writer and I work in a magazine, and I'm a priest as well. I celebrate mass and, the sacraments and all that and preach. But it's kind of a priest / this. I have a friend who works, he's the Catholic chaplain at San Quentin. I have another friend who works with refugees on the border, refugees and migrants. So I like that what they did. What keeps me though is who they are and our spirituality of really finding God in all things.
Yeah, your journey, though very different than mine. I went to seminary, became a local church pastor, but always loved writing. Ended up working at Christianity Today magazine for 11 years and writing.
Oh, great magazine.
So I get the idea of wanting a form of faith that it can express itself in different forms, and you're doing a lot of great communicating. One of the things that intrigued me about the Jesuit order, and still does, and Loyola and some of the things, is not just the mystical spirituality side of it, which is meaningful, but in a weird way, it struck me as kind of Protestant.
In what way? That's kind of great. I love that.
Well, because when I read the Protestant reformers, a lot of what I was reading was a desire to break down the divide between the sacred and the secular, to see all things as holy, all callings as vocations, true callings from the Lord, that the creation itself and all the world was good and part of God's redemptive purposes. And having come from, even within American evangelicalism, there was this kind of weird, strict bifurcation between sacred things and secular things. And when I read the Protestant reformers, like, oh, they're breaking that barrier down a lot. And then I read some Jesuits and going, well, yeah, they had this kind of integrated vision of the spiritual life that didn't bifurcate the world into these buckets. So am I accurately reflecting Jesuit
what
thought?
you're doing right now? You are kind of blowing my mind in a good way.
Okay.
In a good way. Let me tell you why. St. Ignatius, the founder of the Jesuits, 1491 to 1556, started the Jesuits to help souls. That was the kind of general way we looked at it. But they are often miscategorized as starting the Jesuits, or Ignatius is often miscategorized as starting the Jesuits to counter the Reformation.
Right.
And so when you talk about the counter-Reformation, it's often the Jesuits, the Baroque, all this kind of stuff. And just as an aside, he never saw himself as doing that, right? I mean, he opposed Martin Luther and all this stuff, but, it was all the Catholics did back then. But I think you're right. I think that one of the things that Ignatius came into sort of trouble for was just that, that the secular and the sacred were sort of together, that you could communicate with God without going through a priest, right? Which is really interesting just to think about. So I think he did have a lot in common with the reformers. In a sense, he was in a sense reforming the church, kind of from the inside out.
Right.
But yeah, the spirituality of the Jesuits is finding God in all things. And that means not simply in church and in the sacraments and in the Bible, but in relationships and nature and music and art, in work, right? In family, of course. And yeah, I think that's a really interesting insight that you just made. So you kind of blew my mind in a good way.
Well, it's part of why I've enjoyed your writing so much, because you do this for so many. You are this, you're a priest. You're a bridge between the church and the world, or between Jesuit thought and people outside of that tradition. And you do a great job at it. I want to talk a little bit about your functioning in that role as a mediator of sorts for the church in our culture. We've had Ryan Burge on this podcast a lot. He's a friend of ours. He's a sociologist of religion and former Baptist minister. And he writes in the New York Times and all over the place about, is there a religious revival happening or not? And he and I have talked endlessly about this. And he keeps saying to me, there is no data that shows any movement on this front. There's no increase in church attendance. There's nothing that we're seeing yet in the numbers. And yet I've talked to a number of people who anecdotally say there's something happening right now. What's your take on that?
It's so funny you bring this up, because everyone talks about this, that young people are going to church, they're flooding churches. And anecdotally, I see it and I hear it, especially from my Jesuit brothers who are working in Catholic colleges, who are saying, oh my gosh, the 10 o'clock mass on Sunday is packed. And I just talked to someone last night who said, up at Columbia University, they're baptizing like 18 Catholics or whatever the number was. And it was a lot. And so anecdotally, I hear that. And then yesterday, I saw this study that said, no, Gen Z are not going back to church. That's completely false. Here's the data. So I don't know what to believe. Maybe it's sort of geographic. Maybe it's confined to colleges and universities. And that's why I'm hearing it, because Jesuits do so much work in colleges and universities. I would say anecdotally, I hear it a great deal. I have a good friend who works in campus ministry at Georgetown University and another one that works at Boston College, both Jesuit Catholic schools. And they tell me this, that, 10 years ago, it was not packed, right, at Mass. So maybe it's just colleges. But again, I literally just saw yesterday this thing saying that's baloney. Here's the statistics. So who knows? Maybe it's in particular places and among particular people. I certainly think there's a hunger among younger people. I call it, someone mentioned this to me, a scholar, post-secular. I really love this. So first we had sort of, we could say, post-faith or post-religion, where people kind of fell away. You have the nuns, people who don't have any denomination. Then you have the dones, people who are just done with everything. But I think it's kind of post-secular now. People are finding that secularity or secularism doesn't really do it for them.
Are you able to put your finger on what it is about secularism that is coming up empty? Or maybe in conversations you've had either with young people or priests, what are they hearing?
Yeah, sure. And I don't mean to be glib at all. This is going to sound like a glib answer, but there's no God there, right? So it's kind of lacking. I think we all have a fundamental desire for God. And I think when that is not satisfied, as Augustine said, our hearts are restless until they rest in you, O Lord. And, there's a reason why I always say that the crowd were pressing in on Jesus. It wasn't simply his preaching and his healing. It was him. There's a desire for God. There's a desire for the divine. And so I think that's the main thing. But then I also think that two things going on. I think people are craving identity. I hear that word a lot. They want an identity. And that's why among Catholics, it's often more traditional ways of expressing the faith, more sort of outward, going towards churches and parishes that foster that more kind of outward signs of identity. They were looking for community. And then also, I think in kind of difficult times, I'm not going to get political at all, but
you're welcome
these are kind of tough. I'll try my best not to. These are, let's say, divisive times.
Yeah. And
people are really looking for something that is solid and that is grounded. And then finally, I think they're looking for a sense of awe and mystery. That's what I hear from young people. But they want, for the Catholics that are joining, it's like, I want something that goes back to Jesus. I want something that's firm. I want something that's clear. I want an identity. I want a community. So those are kinds of things I'm hearing.
I agree. I think that, and this is all anecdotal as well, the lack of guidance that secularity offers, I think, is a factor in a world where it's moving so quick and there are endless decisions that people have to make all the time, far more than there used to be. There's a desire for some wisdom or guidance maybe from the past, and religion offers that to a lot of folks. But on the flip side of that, I'm sure you've seen the data, and this is not unique to the Catholic Church. It's just as prevalent in Protestant and evangelical traditions. People come in for various reasons, but then they do the cafeteria thing and they decide which parts of this they want and which ones they don't. Does that counter the benefits if people are just coming and going, well, I want some structure to my life and my spirituality and my sense of meaning and purpose, but I don't want that part.
But I want that.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is a great conversation because I think that's part of it, right? I think that to a certain degree, all of us are, in my faith, cafeteria Catholics. There's some things that we don't like. If you're conservative, you don't like this and that. If you're progressive, you don't like this and that. So I think it's a struggle for Catholics to accept all of it. Now, the fundamentals we all accept, the creed. We all stand up and say the creed every Sunday. But I think there's also something else that's a challenge, which is this. I think that sometimes when people enter the church, at least the Catholic Church, looking for black and white answers, right? It removes a sense of mystery to the faith. And also, look, the faith is an encounter with a person, with Jesus Christ, right? Who's risen and we encounter Jesus, the risen one, through the Spirit. That's how I see it. And that's a mystery. And so to say that, to be Catholic or even Christian means just ticking all these boxes, like if I believe this, and this, then I'm a Christian. I think removes the mystery. And I think that's what we see a lot of online, which is this. So you're helping me kind of formulate this in my mind. What we see online is, well, if you don't believe in these 50 boxes that I tick, you're a bad Catholic or you're a bad Christian, versus like looking at it as a relationship, right? I mean, there's some fundamentals we have to believe, but I think can sometimes get boiled down to just these sort of statements of belief. And I always say to people, Jesus, Jesus didn't come out of the, like Nazareth as a book. He's a person. It's a mystery. It's a reason for that. And I think that sometimes it's hard for people to kind of accept that. And the other thing is that the even sort of more difficult to understand is the Spirit. I mean, the Holy Spirit's still here, right? And so what's the Spirit doing? And that's frightening, I think, to people who enter just for black and white. Yeah. That's the challenge, I think.
Oh, entirely. In my tradition, one of the besetting sins is we tend to exchange a communion with the Holy Spirit for engagement with the Holy Book. And I think the scriptures are inspired and an incredibly important gift that God has given us, a window through which we see him more clearly. And, I'm Protestant in my approach to the scriptures. And yet I know so many people in my tradition who know chapter and verse, know the doctrines, know the teachings of scripture, who lack a genuine communion with the Holy Spirit.
Yeah. And what does it mean to you who lack a genuine communion with the Holy Spirit? Because that might mean something different from me.
Well, I to your point, it's not about intellectual agreement with a set of beliefs. It's about communion with God through his indwelling Spirit, and that fostering of intimacy with God that is a mystery. And there's that wonderful scene in John 4 where Jesus is interacting with the Samaritan woman by the well. And the Samaritans and Jews had a fundamental disagreement of doctrine and theology of, do you worship in Jerusalem or do you worship on Mount Gerizim? And Jesus says, hey, the Father wants you to worship him in spirit and truth, not on this mountain or that mountain. And when I was a younger man, I was foolish enough to think that what Jesus meant by truth there was doctrinal truth. Like, you got to get your doctrine figured out. And that can't possibly be what he meant, because they had a doctrinal difference with Samaritans. I think what he means there, and this is backed up by other stories, I think he meant honesty. Telling the truth about yourself, to reveal before him who you truly are. And then, of course, he goes on to have a conversation with this woman about how she was hiding the truth of herself and all the different husbands she'd had and things like that. And so I know people who know doctrinal truth and will confess those doctrines, but are unwilling to admit the truth about themselves and come before God. And I think the Catholic Church has a great advantage in this area, because you regularly practice the discipline of confession, which is admitting the truth about ourselves. And in many Protestant traditions, we've ignored that. Well, I confess my sins once and I'm forgiven. I don't have to deal with that anymore. I think that's a short-sighted vision of what intimacy with God requires. But anyway.
Well, let me respond to that.
Yeah, please.
It's really, really interesting. I want to say two things. Really interesting. First, when you think about the Samaritan woman, Jesus, it's Mount Gerizim for the Samaritans, and it's the temple for the Jews, of course. And of course, for Jesus, right? I also think he's saying, I'm in front of you, right? And so it's that I'm here now, right? And so I don't abrogate the Old Testament, but it's me,
totally,
right in front of you. I am he, and I am the living water. So I think that's fascinating too. So it's another reminder that it's him that we're supposed to worship. The other thing, you're in my tradition, I would also say this about the Holy Spirit, that without an understanding of the Holy Spirit at work, we fail to discern the signs of the times. Like, what is the Spirit asking us to do today about fill in the blank? And if you just have sort of black and white answers of things, you sort of are unable to discern what the Holy Spirit, which is alive. I mean, there's a reason why Jesus sends it on Pentecost, alive with us and encouraging us to do things. And I think that's what's challenging. And in the church, in the Catholic Church, this might be a little too inside baseball, but, Pope Francis was really big on discernment and where's the Spirit. And one of the pushbacks to Pope Francis in the Catholic Church was, wait a minute. Why do we need all that? We have all these rules already. And the critique against him was, oh, you're just saying anything goes.
Right.
And his point was, no, we're listening to the Spirit, which is active and alive in the church, which includes being active and alive in everyone, not just the Pope and cardinals and bishops, but everyone. And that was really threatening to people. So I think what you're raising is really important. And of course, by the way, can I tell you something funny? One of my college professors or theology professors used to say we have a impoverished understanding of the Holy Spirit, which is the primary way that I believe that we encounter God today through the Spirit. And he said, I'm sure you've heard this. He said, most Catholics think of the old man, Jesus, and the bird. And we need to get past that.
Old man, Jesus, and the bird. Yeah, we do need to get past that. Going back to John 4 and the Samaritan woman and the whole, I love that you brought up the fact that Jesus is saying, no, I'm here. Because I've been writing about that. I write a daily devotional online called With God Daily. And for months and months and months, I've been doing a series on temple theology from the Old Testament into the New Testament. And John 4 is a brilliant text where you're right. Jesus is essentially saying, I am the new temple. I am where God dwells on earth right now. And here, so it's such a rich, beautiful theology. And then you get into the epistles and seeing how the Spirit comes in the church now. The people of Christ are his temple and the presence of God. And it's a whole world, at least in my Protestant communities, we don't think about that in any meaningful way. And I think it leaves us with an impoverished vision of both of the Holy Spirit and our vocation and calling as God's temple in the world now. So,
well, and the other thing I love about that story, that's one of my favorite stories. And one of the things I love about it is that he's saying this to someone who's completely on the margins.
That's right.
And I'm sure you know this. She's at the well at 12 o'clock, the hottest time of the day, not with the other women, probably because she's been ostracized because she's been married 5 times. So he's saying this. And of course, the disciples I love at the end are like, why are you talking to that woman?
Yeah.
And so what I love is that he's saying this to someone who's kind of on the outs. And he's bringing her, in a sense, into the new temple, right? This woman who is on the outs from the Jews and on the outs from her own people, which is just great. It's just such a perfect story.
I love that we're geeking out together about a Bible story because to riff off of that, when Jesus talks in that same text about how he is a spring of living water, he's quoting from Old Testament prophetic passages about a new temple coming.
About the temple.
Right. And that waters will flow from this new temple and fill the earth and bring life wherever it goes. And here he is bringing himself, the new temple, to this woman outside of Israel and welcoming her into this new fellowship that is being grown through his presence. And it's just, there's so much rich theology there, including the very practical reality of we as his followers are to be reaching out to those on the margins. Which brings me to another topic I want to get to before we run out of time. There's a lot going on in our world right now. There's a lot of Christians who are at least Christian in name, invoking Jesus and Scripture and the church to advocate for things that I think you and I would agree are antithetical to the way of Jesus. Despite the anecdotal evidence that more young people are wanting to come into faith and seeking the church, how are you navigating your public role in having to advocate for the values of the church and the faith at a time when so many seem to want to be doing the opposite without just becoming political and combative and divisive?
Yeah, by focusing on the Gospels. And so if questions come up about people on the margins, by focusing on truly the woman at the well, for example, or the Roman centurion, or Zacchaeus, right? Or, someone with leprosy. And, Pope Francis had this really great line that I go back to all the time. And, one of his gifts, he was the Jesuit, like I am, the first Jesuit Pope, and probably the last. That's the joke, because he kind of, shook things up so much. He said that we are called to form people's consciences, not replace them. So I just love that. And that is, in a sense, what Jesus does at times, with his parables. So what does that mean? That means when you and I are talking about the woman at the well and talking about Jesus at the living water and saying that he appeared to someone, or he encounters someone who's on the margins, right? I think it's enough to say that and to let people draw their own conclusions about what's going on politically today, rather than me or you saying, vote for this person or don't vote for that person. That's replacing consciences. And also, Jesus did that. And how did Jesus do that? When he is asked, who is my neighbor? Right? He doesn't say, here are the 10 things to make up a neighbor. He doesn't give like a PowerPoint presentation. He tells the story, right? A man goes down to Jericho. He tells the story, the Good Samaritan. He's helping people form their own consciences. So that's what I try to do. I try to stay away from, so I'm not going to say, names or parties or whatnot, unless I'm asked, of course.
Right.
But I think it's better just focus on the Gospels, and that should be powerful enough, right? I think Jesus. I think Jesus's words, are more important than mine or yours.
Amen to that. I'm impressed when I hear folks like you and others who are public-facing Christians who often have a platform in secular media. When you do get into those environments and talk simply about, here's what Jesus said, here's what Jesus did, here's what we see in the Gospels, how your interviewer or the secular audience that's engaging in it, like they lean in. People are genuinely drawn to the beauty and goodness of Christ and the gospel. And when I see so many others in the culture or on social media especially who are hammering them over the head with what they think is Christian truth, they lean back and they're just like, I'm not.
Well, that's really insightful. You know what I think is going on? Number one, I think whoever the interviewer is or the journalist is, I think as a human being, they themselves have a desire for God, even if they don't recognize it and they consider themselves atheists or agnostic, it's there. Second, I think that many of them are Christian. And so they key into that and they understand that and they know those passages. And third, I think it's refreshing for people, right? To not say, this person is whatever, is terrible, is evil, just to say, let's focus on Jesus. And it's refreshing, I think. So it works spiritually. It's the right thing to do. But I think it also works strategically, right? To help people, to invite people. And St. Ignatius Loyola, one of the great lines from a founder of the Jesuit, said, go in their door and come out your door. Meaning speak to them as they want to be spoken to and as they can understand it. And then bring them out your door. So encounter them where they are and then bring them out and talk to them about the Gospels, meet people where they are, which is what Jesus did.
Indeed. Yeah. And to echo what you said about Pope Francis, his line about, how did it go? We want to form.
We're meant to form consciences, not replace them.
It seems like such a hospitable and gentle approach.
Yes.
Right. Rather than
an
authoritarian.
Well, look, I love talking about Jesus, as you can tell. I mean, Jesus says, I always like this, Lord, where do you stay? Right. And John, and Jesus says, come and see. He doesn't say, come and see, or I'll punch you in the face, or come and see, or I'll eradicate your village. It's an invitation. Mm-hmm. Come and see. And, like the rich young man, they can come or not. So it's very gentle. Jesus is very gentle in his invitation too.
Well, I want to gently invite you to stick around for a few more minutes for a bonus conversation that I want to have. You've done a lot of advocacy for LGBTQ folks within the Catholic Church. I want to talk about what that looks like and why it looks so different in the Protestant and evangelical traditions. And I have a lot I want to ask you about that. So thanks for being on our main show here. If you're a HOLYPOST Plus subscriber, stick around. We're going to have that bonus conversation coming to you soon. Dr. James Martin, Father James Martin, are you a doctor also?
I have honorary doctorates, but I don't think that really counts.
Oh, well, Dr. Father James Martin, thank you for being with us. Hey, if you like this video, like and subscribe so that you can get more HOLYPOST content and others can find it as well.